Hello, hello. Welcome everybody to day one of the Clarinet Mentors 5 Days to Better Clarinet Tone. And in those 15 minutes, I'm going to give you as many pointers as I can and hopefully some homework that you can also do at home to allow you to just make it easier to get the sound that you want. So we're going to cover many topics. Each day I'll give you a little exercise that I want you to experiment with. I think that we were all attracted to the clarinet by some beautiful sound, or at least for most people. We have players who really inspire us. And as part of Better Clarinet Tone Week, I encourage you to listen to some of your favorite recordings and have that in mind as we're going through it. The things that I think most affect our tone quality are fairly evident. Our embouchure, which is how we hold our mouth, our air support, how we blow to really support tone, that's huge, and it's so important. All of tomorrow's broadcast is going to be related to air support, although we'll talk about it a little bit today. Your gear can affect tone, and it does affect tone. So I want to give you my best pointers for choosing different kinds of gear, and we will do that, I think, on our third day of these lessons together. So we're going to cover lots of topics over the next week. I'm so glad you're here. I'm going to start right away with some simple things. Now, these trainings are designed for clarinetists of many levels, mostly with the beginner to intermediate player in mind. If you're a total beginner, hooray to you for being here. Some of the exercises I show may have notes you haven't learned yet, but I think it's really great that you have the concepts in mind because it'll save you a lot of bad habits. So I'm going to start by sharing with you some of the common bad habits I see people inadvertently falling into just because they don't know any better. And you can check to see if you might have these. These are things that can make a quick fix to your tone. Some of the things we need to do to improve, we have to train our body regularly with some discipline over the course of a few weeks or a few months, but some of them are really easy to do right away. So here's a really simple one to check on. When you have your clarinet in your mouth, many people do not put the optimum amount of mouthpiece in their mouth. What we want when we play clarinet is for our reed to vibrate back and forth on the mouthpiece really, really quickly. And the more it vibrates, the more sound and the more ease of sound we get. So that's how we shape our mouth affects it, how we blow our air affects it. If we just have a tiny bit of mouthpiece in our mouth, we're only letting a little bit of the reed vibrate. So if you've never experimented with this, one of the first things you can do is just check how much mouthpiece you have in your mouth. And there's a simple way to do it. You could take any note. Maybe I'll just play an open G, which is the note we play when we simply put our clarinet in our mouth and blow. On an open G, this is what it would look like. I'll start with a little bit in my mouth. I'll put in a bit more. Play again. I'll put in a bit more. There's an invisible point on your mouthpiece where, generally speaking, you'll sound better the closer you get to it, and you cross it, you get a horrible squeak. It'll look something like this. I got kind of a half squeak on about my fourth time there. It was easy to see where it was. And what I hear in my studio here is that each of those notes, until I got to the edge of the squeak point there, gave me fuller sound and more sound. So that's a really basic thing. Over time, even experienced players do tend to slip to the tip. I need to check this in my own playing and remind myself of it from time to time. So if you haven't experimented with that, please do. Here's the other big common bad habit, and people fall into it so easily, especially people new to the clarinet, but you might have been doing this for years and not being aware of it. The bad habit is to tilt our chin down when we play. And most people have no awareness they're doing it. So my challenge to you is record yourself. Whatever device you're watching me on right now probably has the ability to record you on video. So use it and turn sideways and look at yourself and notice if you look down. It's a bad habit for a couple of reasons. One is it does restrict our airflow a little bit, and fast air is really important to good clarinet tone. But secondly, the angle our face makes with the clarinet opening affects how the air works. And if we're looking down too far, it slows our air down in a way that creates not such a great sound. Even on an open G, and even through your computer or whatever you're watching on, I think you'll hear the difference as I turn my head down. What you might hear is that I'm completely fuzzing out there. And it would be more dramatic in the high register. When we're in the high register, the notes are even more reactive. So if I were to take my high C, thumb and register key, do the same exercise, listen to what you hear. It cuts out completely. So check to see if your head is down. Really what we want is right now I'm looking straight ahead at you as if to say, hello, I want to keep my head there and I bring the clarinet to me without moving my head. So that's just a simple exercise you can do looking in the mirror. Now, really clever people who've had this bad habit for a long time will do this. Yes, I'm fine. And they blow and their head goes down and they don't even realize it. So watch for that in your own playing. All right, so 2 things you could check right away. Do you have enough mouthpiece? Is the angle of your head right? Now, let's say your head is up. We still can affect the angle of our clarinet just by moving it. And that's always worth checking too. Everyone's jaw and teeth structure is different. We all have kind of a sweet spot, a range where we'll most get the clarinet sound that we want to get. And you should find out where that is. If you do play a high C, it's a great note to test it out on. Start by pulling your clarinet in probably as far as you can, which for most people would not be the ideal range. Slowly put it out and see what you hear. So when I get all the way out, I can't even make that note play, but you might have heard a little bit muffled when it was all the way in, then it kind of started sounding better, and then it got all the way out and it was not so good anymore. So that's something you can experiment with. So 3 mini pieces of homework there. Check the angle of the head, check the angle of your clarinet, check how much mouthpiece you have. All right, over the next few days, I will go into much more detail on each of the things that I think really affect tone. Those are just some quick things that for a lot of people make a difference, and I want you to check on those in your own playing to see if that might help you right away. Air support is going to be the focus of our whole 15-minute session tomorrow. But I just want to introduce a general concept for you on it that you can kind of start working on a little bit in preparation for tomorrow's call. On the clarinet, for most styles of clarinet playing that we're doing, and I realize some of you focus more on a classical sound, some of you jazz, maybe some of you klezmer, so there's a lot of different types of tone when we say good clarinet tone. But most of the things I'm teaching you are going to help all of those styles of music, whatever your focus is. So on clarinet, we generally blow our air faster. And the reason I'm making this gesture is I imagine if I could see the air coming out of my mouth, the way we can see water coming out of a hose, what we want to aim for on clarinet is that we've turned our spray valve so that it's a tight, fast, compressed stream. We're not looking for fine spray. That's too slow to make a good tone on the clarinet and generally isn't going to work very well for us. So that means that for most of us, we have to do some things and train our body and our blowing muscles to blow faster air and then to keep it steady all of the time. We have this innate habit, every clarinetist I've ever met does it, of when we change notes, we pulse our air a little bit, especially when we're tonguing. If you were part of the articulation challenge last month, we talked about that a bit there. But even when we're slurring, sometimes our air will go. It's like when we move our fingers, we move our air. So as clarinetists, we want to try and get our air more nonstop, more continuous, and more fast and compressed. And there are lots of exercises to do that. We're going to focus on many of them tomorrow. But what I will say you could do just to practice a little bit, warming up before tomorrow, is to simply take a piece of paper and hold it at arm's length. If I turn sideways, I'm just slightly going off my camera. Let's see. I think I could do it like that. And you want to practice focusing your air into a small stream so there's a lot of power behind it. See if you can just move your paper. Now I'm doing little bursts of air. And if I were to do that about 5 or 6 times with my paper, don't cheat by bending your elbow, hold it all the way out. It kind of starts to warm up my blowing muscles. So I'm going to just leave that exercise as a teaser into air support because we're going to expand on it more tomorrow. But I do want you to think about that. And before we finish off today, just to remind you of the other topics we're covering, I am going to be covering gear in detail in a couple of days, but I'll just say this right now. If you are playing on the mouthpiece that came with your clarinet, that would be one piece of gear I would really encourage you to think about upgrading. You know, you can sound good on almost any kind of clarinet setup, and certainly there are many beautiful mouthpieces and beautiful instruments and beautiful barrels and wonderful ligatures that all enhance sound. But for many of you, you may have a fairly basic setup and you still want to sound really good, and you can sound quite good on a basic setup. I think the mouthpiece, though, makes as much difference as just about any other piece of gear. There are many good mouthpieces out there. I'll talk a bit more about them when I get to the equipment day. But what I will say is, again, because everyone's face and jaw is so different, it's very subjective which mouthpiece works best. And the best thing to do, if you are able to, is go to a place where you can bring in your clarinet and try a few different mouthpieces out and see what feels comfortable for you and what sounds great. You can usually tell very quickly which ones they are. And I'll give you some more guidelines on that, but I just wanted you to be thinking if there's any gear that is worth the upgrade, it's a good mouthpiece. If you ever upgrade the rest of your instrument, which is a more expensive investment, you can usually keep that same good mouthpiece and use it on your new clarinet. But it's one of the most drastic ways to improve sound, just by swapping out a piece of your gear. So if we're just talking about things you can do without a huge investment that make a difference, a good quality mouthpiece is definitely something to consider. All right, so if I have homework for you after today's session, there's a few things. We're going to look at those little things I just talked about. Check the angle, record yourself from the side, experiment with more mouthpiece. Do the little paper exercise. This is a warm-up for the blowing exercises that we're going to get into in detail tomorrow. I think that gives us a really good introduction to the kind of things we're going to work on refining: embouchure, air, and gear. So our next session will be focused on air, the one after that on some much more detailed things of embouchure, shape of our mouth, how we hold our tongue, that can really impact your sound. And we'll get into more detail on the gear. 15 minutes a day. Thank you for being here. Your dedication means you are on the right track to really having success on the clarinet, and I appreciate you joining me. We'll get into much more detail on air tomorrow's session. Thank you so much, everybody. Love having you here, and I hope to see you tomorrow.